I thought standing up for a terrified coworker was the easiest moral choice I'd make that year. I never imagined that helping him through a panic attack would cost me the career I'd spent 8 years building, or expose a truth no one in that office was ready to face. Daniel had been our manager for exactly 9 days when he looked around the packed conference room and smiled like he'd just thought of a joke. "Let's hear from our new designer." Ethan's head snapped up. 20 people turned toward him. His coffee cup rattled softly against the table. "I wasn't told I'd be presenting," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Perfect. Clients don't send invitations before asking questions." A few people forced polite smiles. The rest stared at their laptops. Ethan stood slowly. His hands trembled as he connected his laptop to the screen. The campaign he'd designed was outstanding. Clean layouts, bold colors, exactly what the client had requested. Normally, one of the account managers would present while the designer answered technical questions. Today, Daniel had changed the rules. "So," he said, folding his arms, "walk us through every decision." Ethan swallowed. The concept focuses on..." His voice caught. He stopped. The room became painfully quiet except for the hum of the projector. Daniel didn't help. He watched, waiting. Ethan tried again. "I wanted the visuals to..." Nothing. His breathing became shallow. One hand gripped the conference table so tightly his knuckles turned white. Daniel sighed loudly. "If you can't explain your own work," he said, "maybe you don't belong in a corporate office." The words landed harder than anyone expected. Across the table, I saw 2 coworkers exchange uncomfortable glances. One looked down at her notebook. Another quietly muted his microphone, as if even breathing felt too loud. Nobody spoke. I knew why. HR had already informed management that Ethan had severe social anxiety. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't gossip. It was documented before his first day, so reasonable accommodations could be made. Daniel knew. He simply didn't care. Ethan stared at the screen, but he wasn't looking at the slides anymore. His chest rose faster with every breath. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple despite the freezing air conditioning. Daniel tapped the table. "Come on!" Another tap. "We're waiting!" Then Ethan's mouse slipped from his hand. It hit the floor with a sharp crack. He bent to pick it up but froze halfway down, his breathing turning into short, uneven gasps. I recognized the look immediately. This wasn't ordinary nervousness. This was the beginning of a panic attack. His face had gone completely pale. "I'm sorry." He couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel shook his head. "Incredible. We hire professionals, not people who shut down under basic pressure." That was enough. I pushed my chair back. "That's enough, Daniel." Every head turned toward me. I walked to Ethan's side, unplugged his laptop from the projector, and quietly said, "Come with me." He looked completely overwhelmed, but he nodded. Daniel's voice followed us. "So we're just leaving the meeting now?" I looked back. "He needs medical support, not an audience." For the first time all morning, Daniel's smile disappeared. I ignored him. The hallway felt almost silent after the conference room. I guided Ethan into a small wellness room HR used for employees who needed privacy. The lights were dimmer there, the noise almost gone. He sat down but couldn't stop shaking. "You're okay," I said calmly. "Don't try to talk, just breathe." I slid a bottle of water across the table and cracked the door open slightly so the room wouldn't feel closed in. After several long minutes, his breathing finally slowed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I couldn't believe he'd apologized. "You have absolutely nothing to apologize for." His eyes filled with embarrassment. "He knew," he said quietly. "HR told him before I started." That sentence stayed with me long after he was able to return home. Back at my desk, the office was strangely quiet. Nobody asked how Ethan was. Nobody mentioned the meeting. but several coworkers avoided looking at Daniel's office altogether. I opened my email. Then I opened the HR reporting portal. If management already knew about Ethan's condition and this had been intentional, silence would make me part of it. I started typing. What happened after I pressed submit changed my life faster than I could have imagined. I read my HR complaint 3 times before I clicked submit. I kept the language factual. No emotion, no exaggeration. Date, time, meeting, witnesses. I explained that Ethan had disclosed his severe social anxiety before joining the company, that management had been informed, and that Daniel had deliberately forced him into an unexpected client presentation. I described his panic attack, the public comments, and the fact that I had to remove him from the room because he was no longer able to function. Then I closed my laptop and went back to work. For 2 days, nothing happened. At least, nothing obvious. Daniel still walked through the office with that same confident stride, coffee in one hand, tablet in the other, greeting executives with polished charm. If you had only seen him in the hallway, you would have thought he was an outstanding leader. But around the team, the atmosphere had changed. Conversations stopped whenever he appeared. People checked over their shoulders before speaking. Even Ethan had become quieter. He wore noise-canceling headphones almost all day, delivering brilliant designs through Slack instead of walking to someone's desk. Then Daniel stopped beside mine. "You've been unusually protective of the new guy." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just doing my job." "So am I." He tapped my desk twice with his knuckles. "A strong team doesn't encourage weakness." Without another word, he walked away. It sounded casual. It didn't feel casual. The following Tuesday, I received a calendar invite. Meeting with Daniel and HR. No agenda. No explanation. The conference room was almost empty when I arrived. An HR representative sat quietly with a folder already open. Daniel leaned back in his chair as if he were waiting for a routine update. The HR representative folded her hands. "We've reviewed recent concerns regarding team dynamics." That wording immediately caught my attention. Not my complaint. Not the incident. "Your behavior," she continued carefully, "has been creating tension within the department." I blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" Daniel answered before she could. "You've repeatedly challenged leadership in front of employees." "I helped a coworker during a medical emergency." "You undermined management." "I removed someone who was having a panic attack." "You made that decision without authorization." For a second, I genuinely wondered if we had attended the same meeting. I looked at the HR representative. "Are we seriously discussing my behavior instead of what happened to Ethan?" She lowered her eyes to the folder. "We're discussing overall workplace collaboration." Then she slid a single sheet of paper across the table. My name was at the top. Notice of termination. Reason: failure to support leadership. Creating division within the team. Not being a team player. 8 years. That was apparently worth 1 sheet of paper. I looked at Daniel. He wasn't angry. He looked satisfied. Like someone watching the final move of a chess game he'd already won. "You can't be serious," I said quietly. "We wish you the best in your future opportunities," the HR representative replied, sounding as though she were reading from a script. I gathered my notebook, my security badge, and the family photo that had been sitting beside my monitor for years. No one escorted me. No one needed to. The entire marketing department had already noticed. As I walked between the rows of desks, conversations faded. One coworker stood as if she wanted to say something, then slowly sat back down. Another gave me the smallest nod. Near the elevators, I passed Ethan. His face turned white. "They fired you?" I managed a small smile. "Take care of yourself." His expression changed from confusion to guilt. "This is because of me." "No," I shook my head. "This is because someone made a choice." The elevator doors opened. As they closed, I caught one last glimpse of the office that had been my second home for 8 years. I expected that chapter of my life to end there. Instead, my phone vibrated before I had even reached the parking garage. The first message came from a coworker. What they did wasn't right. Then another. I'm willing to tell HR exactly what I saw. Then a third. Daniel has done this before. We stayed quiet. We shouldn't have. I stopped walking. For the first time that day, Daniel's version of the story no longer seemed like the only one. What happened behind those office doors after my termination would decide far more than my career. If you've ever seen someone punished for doing the right thing, share your story in the comments. And if you want to see how this unfolds, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The confirmation appeared on my screen. Your report has been submitted. I expected to feel relieved. Instead, I kept staring at the words, waiting for something else to happen. A case number, a name, a message saying someone would contact me. Nothing came. Across the office, Daniel's door was closed. Through the glass wall, I could see him speaking on the phone. He wasn't pacing, he wasn't angry, he looked calm. That should have worried me more than it did. I closed the HR portal and checked my phone. No new message from Ethan. The last thing he'd written was, "I'm home. Thank you for helping me." I started typing a reply, but before I could send it, every computer in the office made the same soft notification sound. An email from Daniel. Subject: Professional Standards. Thank you to everyone who remained focused during today's unexpected disruption. As a reminder, our department depends on professionalism, adaptability, and respect for established leadership procedures. If concerns arise during a meeting, they should be addressed through the appropriate channels rather than in front of the team. No names, no explanation. But 30 people had watched me stop the meeting and take Ethan out of the room. Everyone knew exactly who he meant. The office became unnaturally quiet. People read the email, then glanced toward me before quickly looking away. Daniel had responded to my complaint without officially knowing it existed. Or maybe he already knew. Melissa from operations rolled her chair closer to my desk. Did he send that because of what happened? He didn't say. He didn't have to. Before I could answer, Daniel's office door opened. He stepped out with his coffee and walked slowly between the desks. "Let's keep moving, everyone," he said pleasantly. "We still have work to do." When he reached me, he stopped. Only for a second. "Everything okay?" His voice was loud enough for the people around us to hear. "Yes." "Good." I know emotions were running high earlier. My jaw tightened. Ethan had a panic attack. Daniel gave me a patient smile, as if I were a child refusing to understand something simple. "And you made a decision without consulting your manager." He couldn't breathe. "You interrupted a department meeting." "I helped an employee who was in distress." His smile disappeared. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Then he walked away. At 3:14, my calendar refreshed. The Monday campaign review vanished. I had led that meeting every week for nearly 2 years. I searched for it manually. The meeting still existed. I simply wasn't invited anymore. A minute later, another notification appeared. Project ownership updated. The product launch I'd managed for 6 months had been reassigned to Olivia, a coordinator who had joined the company that spring. Olivia messaged me immediately. "Did you know about this?" "No." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then returned. "Daniel said you needed time to work on your communication issues." I read the message twice. Communication issues. Less than 4 hours after I had challenged him. Less than 1 hour after I had filed the complaint. I took screenshots of everything. The email, the calendar change, the project reassignment, Olivia's message. I saved them in a personal folder and forwarded copies to my private email. At 4:02, someone from IT appeared beside my desk. Routine permissions update, he said. What permissions? He avoided my eyes. Daniel requested some project access changes. My shared drive refreshed. 3 folders disappeared, then 5. Then the department budget file. Then the campaign archive containing nearly 8 years of my work. Why am I losing access? The IT employee shifted his weight. You'll have to ask Daniel. Daniel was standing near the printer, speaking with 2 team leads. When I approached, he looked almost amused. You removed me from my projects. I adjusted responsibilities. Why? To protect the team. From what? He lowered his voice. From instability. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, Did HR contact you? His expression didn't change. Why would they? I held his gaze. I filed a report. The 2 team leads stopped pretending not to listen. Daniel took a slow sip of coffee. Of course you did. That was all he said. No surprise, no concern, just those 4 words. Of course you did. At 4:30, he called everyone into another meeting. Ethan's chair remained empty. Daniel stood at the front of the room with his hands resting on the table. This morning was unfortunate, he began. But difficult moments show us whether people can put the team ahead of themselves. No one moved. He continued. We all care about our coworkers, but caring doesn't mean ignoring procedure. It doesn't mean undermining leadership, and it certainly doesn't mean turning a manageable situation into a public spectacle. My face grew hot. He was talking about me as if I wasn't sitting 10 feet away. Melissa looked down at her notebook. Olivia stared at Daniel with her lips pressed together. Someone at the far end of the table shifted uncomfortably. Daniel smiled. I don't want anyone discussing what happened with Ethan. He deserves privacy. It sounded compassionate. That was the worst part. He was using Ethan's privacy to stop anyone from challenging his version of events. When the meeting ended, Melissa caught up with me near the elevators. He told Mark you encouraged Ethan to leave. I helped him stand up. He said Ethan was calming down until you interfered. That's not true. I know. Will you tell HR that? The elevator doors opened. Melissa didn't step inside. Her eyes moved toward the security camera above us. I didn't see everything. You were in the room. I have 2 kids, she whispered. Daniel controls the promotion list. The doors started closing. She stepped back. I'm sorry. I rode down alone. The next morning, my keycard flashed red at the employee entrance. I tried again. Red. A security guard opened the door from inside. System problem? I asked. He looked at the monitor beside him. It says your access is limited. Limited by whom? He didn't answer. At my desk, a printed document was waiting beside my keyboard. Performance concern notice. There was no envelope, no signature, just a list of accusations. Failure to follow management direction. Disruptive conduct during a departmental meeting. Inappropriate interference with another employee's performance. Negative impact on team morale. The final line read, demonstrated unwillingness to operate as a team player. I checked the creation time in the document properties. 4:18 p.m. the previous day. Daniel had started preparing it less than an hour after my HR complaint. My phone vibrated. Ethan. Daniel called me last night. I stood up so quickly my chair rolled backward. What did he say? The reply took almost a minute. He said you made the situation worse. He wants me to sign a statement saying I never asked you to take me out of the room. My hands went cold. Don't sign anything you don't agree with. The typing indicator appeared. He said my probation period can be reviewed at any time. Before I could respond, a calendar invitation appeared. Human Resources Meeting, 10 a.m. Location, Conference Room 4. Attendees: Daniel, HR business partner, me. No description. No mention of my complaint. At 9:58, I walked into the conference room carrying my notebook and printed screenshots. Daniel was already seated. The HR representative sat beside him with a closed folder in front of her. There was a cardboard box on the floor. I looked at it, then at Daniel. He folded his hands on the table. The HR representative didn't ask about Ethan. She didn't ask about the panic attack. She didn't ask why Daniel had forced him to speak after being informed about his condition. Instead, she opened the folder and said, "We're here to discuss concerns about your ability to work as part of a team." That was when I understood. This meeting wasn't about my complaint. It was about getting rid of me before anyone investigated it. Before I tell you what happened inside that room, let me ask you something. If you saw a coworker being deliberately pushed into a panic attack, would you stay quiet to protect your job? Or step in, even if it made you the next target? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe doing the right thing should never cost someone their career, subscribe, because what happened next exposed far more than one bad manager. I sat down across from the HR business partner and looked at the folder in front of her. Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't have to. She opened the folder and slid a document toward me. "We've received multiple concerns regarding your conduct." I looked at the first page. Every complaint was dated yesterday, the same day Ethan had his panic attack, the same day I filed my report. Failure to follow management direction, creating unnecessary disruption, damaging team cohesion. I looked up. "Is this because I helped Ethan?" "This meeting is about your behavior," she replied calmly. "My behavior was helping an employee who couldn't breathe." Daniel finally spoke. "You removed him from the meeting without approval. He was having a panic attack. You made that determination yourself. I watched it happen. You aren't a medical professional." I turned back to HR. "Did either of you speak with Ethan?" She hesitated. "We're reviewing all available information." "So, no." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "The issue isn't Ethan. The issue," I said, "is that you knew about his condition before yesterday." His expression stayed perfectly neutral. "I knew he was nervous. You knew he requested accommodations. I knew HR was working with him. Then why did you call on him without warning?" Silence. For the first time since I'd entered the room, Daniel didn't have an answer ready. The HR representative broke the silence. "Let's stay focused." "I am focused." I reached into my bag and placed several printed pages on the table. The email Daniel sent after the meeting. Another sheet. The projects I was removed from. Another. The calendar invitation I was excluded from. Then the last page. The timestamps. I tapped the corner of the paper. Every one of these happened after I reported what he did. The HR representative picked up the documents. She flipped through them without saying anything. Daniel watched her carefully. "They're management decisions," he said. "They happened within hours. They were necessary." "For what reason?" He smiled. "Performance." I almost laughed. My performance changed in one afternoon? Neither of them answered. Instead, HR closed the folder. "We appreciate your perspective." Perspective, not evidence, perspective. Then she slid another document across the table. It was already signed by Daniel. Across the top were the words, "Final written warning. If you choose not to sign," she said, "we'll simply note that you declined." I pushed it back. "I'm not signing something that's false." Daniel stood. "That's your decision." The meeting lasted less than 20 minutes. Nothing about Ethan. Nothing about accommodations. Nothing about my complaint. As I walked back toward my desk, I realized something. They had never intended to investigate my report. They had already decided I was the problem. I packed my laptop into my bag without saying a word. Most of the office pretended not to notice. Melissa looked like she wanted to say something. She didn't. Olivia avoided looking at me entirely. Daniel remained inside his office, talking on the phone as if the meeting had been just another item on his calendar. When I reached the parking lot, my phone vibrated. An email. Not from HR, not from Daniel. From someone whose name I didn't recognize. The subject line was only 4 words. Regarding yesterday's meeting. 3 days after I was fired, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the company's main number. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "This is Karen from Corporate Legal. Is now a good time?" I didn't say yes. I simply listened. "We've completed an initial review of the documents you submitted." I frowned. "I didn't submit anything after I was fired." "You didn't need to. Your HR complaint, your email attachments, the system timestamps, and additional internal records were enough to begin our investigation." She paused. "There are several inconsistencies between your complaint and Mr. Daniel Carter's statements. For the first time since losing my job, I felt like someone had actually read what I'd written. We'd like to meet with you." That meeting lasted almost 2 hours. Unlike HR, nobody interrupted me. Nobody asked whether I was being emotional. Nobody tried to convince me I'd misunderstood what happened. They only asked for facts. The timeline, the emails, the screenshots, the text messages from Ethan. When we finished, the attorney closed her notebook. "You handled this exactly the way an employee should." It was the first time anyone inside that company had said those words. A week later, I received another call. This one surprised me even more. "We'd like to offer you your position back." I stayed silent. "The termination has been reversed," she continued before I could answer. "You would return to your previous role with a 30% salary increase, full back pay, and your employment record corrected to reflect that no misconduct occurred." I honestly thought I'd misheard her. "Why?" "Because the company has concluded your termination should not have happened." "And Daniel?" There was a brief pause. "I can't discuss personnel matters." She didn't have to. The answer came the next morning. Melissa texted me. "Daniel isn't our manager anymore." A minute later, another message appeared. "He was removed from the department yesterday. They're transferring him to a non-management role while the company completes its review." I looked at the screen for a long time. Then another notification arrived. It was from Ethan. "They offered me a raise too. They want me to stay." A few minutes later, he sent one more message. I turned it down. I called him. "Are you sure?" "I am." "They're offering you more money." "I know." "Then why walk away?" He laughed quietly. "Because I don't want to spend every morning wondering who's going to make me prove I deserve to be there." I couldn't argue with that. He thanked me one last time. I told him he'd been braver than he realized. We hung up. The following Monday, I walked back into the same building I'd carried my cardboard box out of less than 2 weeks earlier. People actually stood up to greet me. Melissa hugged me. Olivia smiled and said, "Welcome back." My old desk was waiting. Only one thing was different. Daniel's office was empty. I sat down, turned on my laptop, and took a deep breath. I never imagined I'd return, but this time, I wasn't walking in afraid of losing my job. I was walking in knowing exactly what it was worth. Looking back, I don't regret helping Ethan. I'd do it again without hesitation. Because careers can recover. Self-respect is much harder to get back once you've traded it away. And if there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. Being a team player doesn't mean protecting a bad manager. Sometimes it means protecting the one person everyone else is too afraid to stand beside.